afternoon, everyone. All of you are requested to kindly take your respective seats so that we can start with the proceedings. Also, kindly put your mobile phones to silent mode so that there are not any disturbances during the proceedings. I request Professor S.K. Sharma, Chairman Institute Lecture Series, to kindly introduce the event.
GVS Shastri, Professor Anil Agrawal, Professor Vakil Singh sir, and other esteemed colleagues and dear students. When we became IIT, one of the programs that the institute started was Institute Lecture Series with an objective of educate to innovate and innovate to change. Innovation should have a proper purpose so that society at large gets benefited from it. And technology has to provide meaningful solutions for better quality of life within the society. With that aim, we invited lecture series speakers. The only qualification which we sought was that they should have done something meaningful and must have impacted the society greatly. With that aim, first speaker was Magsaysay awardee Shri Rajendra Singh, who is called Jal Purush and who was awarded later Nobel Prize for Water. Then we had series of distinguished speakers, and today's speaker is equally distinguished. He is multiply lauded. If you go and see his awards, they are significant, and almost public sector, private sector and government of India. You will find very rare engineers get government awards like Padma Shri and Bharat Ratna and all, Padma awards. And he is one of them. There are very few engineers who are decorated with Padma Shri and Padma awards. Doctors are, because they are in public contact, so they get at much, I will say, much lower level of professional success, probably they get awarded Padma. But engineers are not, because they work at a level and at stages which is not rightly placed for government to seek and award Padma awards. So we have Padma Shri Dr. Kota Harinarayan. I feel privileged to welcome you, sir, in the city of Har. I welcome Dr. Harinarayan in the city of Har, and I am sure, as his name suggests, he will today deliver a lecture on LCA that was called Tejas, and that probably you can be proud to be an Indian that in avionics they have started from scratch and it is now going to be proposed, and in Bahrain there is going to be a full-fledged show on the basis of Tejas. The plane is already over there. So India can send satellites to Mars, India can build its own aeroplanes, and that too fighter airplanes. I'll just submit to this audience, because I was an aerodrome officer, we were told that a civil plane costs as much as a silver plane would cost in terms of weight, and a war plane costs the weight wise same as gold would cost. So if he is making LCA, he is saving a lot of money for the defense sector. That kind of engineers are required by India, and as Modi ji is saying, make in India or substitute defense products within India so that you can save foreign currency and can put that for better utilization in society for people who are underprivileged. So if you save defense money up outside, you enrich the last person in the crowd. So with that, I request Professor Anil Agrawal to introduce him formally. Professor Anil Agrawal.
Very good morning, good afternoon to all of you. Definitely, it's very proud privilege for me to welcome once again Pradhan Shri Kota Harinarayana ji and his missus as well too to this department, this institution. Sri Kota Harinarayana ji had been our alumnus, and that is what is overwhelming me. I'm not finding words to express the kind of feeling I'm having about him. I'm getting nostalgic. So like it's great to maybe have our own alumnus to this department itself. So maybe just to save the time, I'll invite Professor Kota Harinarayana ji to stay over here in front of the dais itself. I'm going to read out the citation for Professor Kota Harinarayana ji itself, and that will take care of his introduction. Of course, Professor Kota Harinarayana ji needs no introduction, correct or not? Yes, Edifan? So, as I said that Professor Kota Harinarayana ji, he needs no introduction. He is a well-known figure. Anybody who has heard about Tejas, he would be knowing him. It was unfortunate for me that, yes, I did not know. So, I really thank Saurabh itself to let me introduce to you. So, I'm going to read the citation for Dr. Kota Harinarayana ji. Dr. Kota Harinarayana is renowned for his pioneering work in the field of aeronautical engineering and is revered as being the driving force behind developing India's light combat aircraft Tejas. He is the creator of the ecosystem for aviation in India and is the man who has seen the Tejas take flight from the drawing board into the skies. He was born in Berhampur, Odisha in 1943. He graduated from this very college, Banaras University, in mechanical engineering in 1965. He earned his master's in aero engineering from Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore, and PhD from IIT Mumbai. He is holding a bachelor's degree in law. He is the former Vice Chancellor of University of Hyderabad, and he was there until 15 July 2005. He has served the Chairman of Research Council of CSIO, Chandigarh, Center of Wind Energy Technology, Chennai. He has been Distinguished Guest Professor at the Department of Aerospace Engineering at IIT Mumbai, Indian Technical Coordinator for India, Toronto, Italy S&T program, Science and Technology program, Pratt & Whitney Chair Professor at University of Hyderabad. He has been member of UGC Power Committee on Basic Research in Sciences and Dr. D.S. Kothari DRDO Chair at ADA, Bangalore. At present, he is the Distinguished Professor at IIT Mumbai, member of Governing Council of NIT Goa and the Chairman of Board of Governors of IITDM Jabalpur. He started his career in 1967 at HAL. He was with DRDO headquarters during 1970 to 1982. He joined HAL in 1982 as Chief Designer in Nasik Division. He was deputed in DRDO in 1985 to serve as Director ADE Bangalore. He was appointed as LCA Program Director in December 1985, and he was concurrently holding the post of Director as the Chief of Light Combat Aircraft. He successfully directed the project leading to fighting, testing and clearance of limited series production. Thanks to his efforts, India succeeded in developing a state-of-art, high-technology fighter aircraft of world class. He is the Fellow of Aeronautical Society of India and had also been as its President. He is also the Fellow of National Academy of Sciences and Indian National Academy of Engineering. He received Distinguished Alumnus Award from Indian Institute of Science and also from IIT Mumbai. He was awarded National Aeronautics Prize and FIE Foundation Award in 1996. He received SBI Pragya Puraskar in 2001. He received the Dr. Y. Nayudamma Memorial Award in 2001. He received the DRDO Technology Leadership Award in 2001. He was honored and decorated with Padma Shri by Government of India in 2002. He received Gujarmal Modi Science Foundation Award in 2006. Indian National Academy of Engineering conferred upon him the Lifetime Contribution Award in Engineering in 2006. He was awarded Shri Om Prakash Bhasin Award for Science and Technology in 2007 in the field of engineering, including energy and aerospace. He received Patent Award from Patent Office, Government of India for the invention of Interactive Triple Display Training Simulator IDTDS. He was awarded with the Silicon Trophy Award for the Technical Managerial Leadership to LCA program on ADA in 2007. He received DRDO Lifetime Achievement Award in 2008. Berhampur University conferred upon him honorary doctorate in 2008. He was conferred with prestigious Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak Award in 2011 for his outstanding contribution in the aviation sector by Tilak Smarak Trust. In summary, maybe his contributions are really much more than what I am reading before you people. Now I am going to summarize his achievement. In summary, Dr. Hari Narayana has made exceptional contributions in the field of aeronautical engineering by being an exemplary leader and an integral part in the various organizations of national importance, and has helped students across the nation by being part of prominent educational institutions. In recognition of his exceptional and significant achievements in his career, the Mechanical Engineering Society of the Department of Mechanical Engineering is proud to felicitate Dr. Kota Hari Narayana by conferring upon him the Distinguished Mechanical Engineering Alumnus Award for Professional Achievements category in the Comet 2016 and the centenary year of Banaras Hindu University. Maybe this conference is all about quality and productivity, so we'll not like to waste our efforts, or maybe we'll like to see that maybe yes, Professor Kota Hari Narayana also saves his energy. So I'm directly inviting him to deliver his talk on his great achievement. He will tell us all about Tejas. Now Professor Kota Hari Narayana.
Give me the mic. Do you have a color mic? You don't have? I am thankful to Professor Agarwal and my department to invite me here. Actually, I am coming here exactly after 50 years after I left. I passed in 1965. And I am here in 2015. And I am extremely happy to be here. And Professor Sengupta, he was our principal. Professor Sengupta was our principal, and when I saw the building, everything, I feel so nice to be here. And it's not that I never came to BHU, but I never came to Institute. Yeah, 10 years back I was here, a guest of fever, the then Vice Chancellor. But I never had an occasion to come to our department. He had some other meetings and also I had to come. So thank you very much for inviting me. And if today I could do something, it's because of the foundation that we got in this August place. And it's a beautiful campus. And see, I come from a small place called Berhampur in Orissa. And for the first time, we went out of our town and came to BHU. And In those days, I don't know about now, we had the choice of either going for engineering or medicine. We were allowed to take mathematics and biology also. And so we applied, and I got a seat in engineering in Orissa in medical, and a seat here. I must say, my father told me, look, he was a freedom fighter. So he told me, look, go to BHU. It's a place where, you will find a lot of scholars. It's a great memories. It was established by Madan Mohan Malviya, a great visionary and a great person. So from a small town, I landed here. But I must say, these 4 years were extraordinarily beautiful, extremely good. And the institute treated all of us quite well. And when we went out in '65, something happened. Most of you are not born even, but some faculty might have been born. And '65 there was a war, Indo-Pakistan war. We had a war in 1962 with China, but the distinguishing factor about '65 was aircraft were used during the war. There was air combat, and if you go back and see the NAT, you will find there was an aircraft called NAT, GN-80 NAT, a very small aircraft, very agile aircraft, and that aircraft in the combat with the F-86 Sabre, the aircraft was called Sabre, was supplied by the Americans to the Pakistan. And this aircraft, it was made in India, it won hands down. It has done wonderfully well, and so we were all getting excited about the whole thing. So that was the time when I thought, if India has to become a superpower, it has to become a country with great technology, we must enter into aviation. So that's how I switched over from mechanical to aviation. Fortunately, I got a seat in Indian Institute of Science, a premier institution then, a premier institute even today. It has a lot of name, and we got entered into aviation, and I continued with aviation from '67 to today. I continue to be there. So you could say that one thing, as an engineer, one important point it comes out is you are taught to solve problems. The problem solving is the key. When you come out of your college, you must see whether am I capable of solving problems which are new. See, scientists discover something which is already there. Engineers create new things every time. There is nothing existing. You make a new bridge, you make a new power plant, you make a new car, you new aeroplane, everything new. So when you want to make something new, if you copy the old thing, there is nothing in it, because nobody will look at it. You have to innovate. So problem solving, innovation are integral part of engineering. Okay? I think that is what perhaps is what keeps you going. And I would like to present to you a story about an aircraft which was developed in India. And we flew this aircraft when the whole world was put sanctions on us. USA put sanctions, everybody had sanctions. But I thought that by putting sanctions, they made us work harder and made us do things which normally people would have thought is not possible to do. And today that aircraft is flying. I think it's all started flying at Bahrain International Air Show, and the Indian Air Force has ordered about 120 of these aircraft, and each aircraft costs roughly about 300 crores. So it's a big business. Fighter aircrafts are costly. Okay, but this is one of the what's called performance to cost ratios. If you look at it, pretty high. That means fairly low cost. I do believe if you buy an aircraft of this class, it will cost you double the money. So if you make in India, you not only have aircraft made in India, but also at a cheaper rate, and with more items, more thousands of engineers being employed, thousands of technicians being employed, and I do believe in a course of time you will be able to export the aircraft. And not only the aircraft, the technologies will help you to do 100 things which you wouldn't have done if you wouldn't have done an aircraft of this class. Okay? So that is what the beauty of these things. So let me now talk to you a little bit about what is the importance of aircraft aviation for a country. You all are engineers, so if you see last 100 years, science and technology have come to dominate human lives everywhere. You can't think of anything to do without technology. Today we went to temple, we were buying Gangajal. So he was doing what you call brazing there and supplying it. Brazing is a very, very important technology. A lot of significant improvements have come. And we were talking about how he has brought down the cost by improving the technology. So you just can't live without technology. Now, technology, military power and wealth, we have to see what is the relationship. Wealth is the basis for military power. If you are a poor country, there is nothing to, there is nothing, no wealth, nothing for you to fight for. Only if you are to protect wealth, you need military power. And there is a significant correlation between a country's ability to generate resources and its military power. Wealth and power are always related to each other. Technology is strength and creator of wealth. If there is no technology, you can't create wealth nowadays. Okay? Just let me make you go back about 1,000 years back. In 10th century AD, the famous Arab geographer Al-Masudi said, the people of Europe, today Europe and USA are the pinnacle of technology, let us say 1,000 years back, the warm humor is lacking among them, their bodies are large, their natures gross, their manner harsh, their understanding dull, and their tongues are heavy. In 1060, 2 years after the Battle of Hastings, Ibn Ahmad, an Arab historian, wrote that 8 nations had contributed most to knowledge, including India, Persians, Greeks, Chinese, Arabs, but no mention of Europeans. Nothing. There is no mention. In 1500, let us move 500 years from there, Europe had no significant advantage in culture, mathematics, engineering, navigational technology compared to great Asian civilizations. The Ming China, Ottoman Empire, the Mughal India, Russia and Japan. Beyond 1500, the course of intellectual history had been altered fundamentally. And why? Steam engines and machine-made tools gave Europe decisive economic and military advantage. These are the things. Steam engine, you used mechanical power to do hundreds of things. And machine-made tools. Until then, tools were made by hand. But then they found a way to make tools by machines. Between 1760 and 1830, UK was responsible for 2/3 of Europe's industrial growth of output. Around 1860, British might was at its peak. UK produced 53% of the world's iron, 50% of coal and lignite, and consumed half the world's cotton output. Whole world was supplying cotton to them. British shipping dominated the world. See technology. The one technology, how it has changed that one. Now let us look at the relation between technology and warfare. Technology helped shape the warfare. In fact, if there was no technology, possibly there was no warfare also. Okay. You started with daggers, spears, swords, horses, chariots, bows and arrows, mechanical artillery, important thing, gunpowder, cannon, firearms, mechanical transport, tanks, fighters, bombers, missiles, and came nuclear weapons. You could see how technology has shaped the war itself. And when the nuclear weapons came, they were so destructive, in a way it prevented global wars. It prevented global wars. So if you see the historically, the evolution of technologies, say between 2000 BC to 1500 in AD, almost 3500 years, muscles of animals and men, nothing else. 1500 AD to 1850, the age of machines came. 1850 to 1945, technology-driven systems. 1945 to now, automated warfare. And 2000, information-dominated warfare. The future is the unmanned battlefield. Today we have a manned fighter like LCA. My understanding is the next fighter is going to be an unmanned combat aircraft. There will be some manned fighters, but that is the kind of change. The first industrial revolution is a mechanical, what you call these things like steam power came. The second industrial revolution came when electricity was invented. The third industrial revolution came when electronics came. Now is the age of fourth industrial revolution, what they call is Industry 4.0. And the fourth industrial revolution is the link between what you call IT, IoT they call it, IoT, and the industry, and the health and whole societal thing. Unfortunately, we lost the first, second, third, but in fourth, we have a strength. So this strength, if we can use, India will not be a laggard behind. India will be one of the leaders in fourth industrial revolution. I mentioned to you because you are now, this year, next year, you're coming out of your engineering. You will find here is a place where changes, technological changes are occurring. Because today you have cheap sensors, the technological NEMs, you have got very cheap processors, and you have got what you call cloud computing, and you have got what you call a bandwidth, very high bandwidths available for very low cost, and thereby an ordinary machine can be made an intelligent machine, and the industry what we have today can be converted into a smart industry, whereby the cost of production, the quality of production, health monitoring, everything can increase. So there is a quantum jump occurring in fourth, the industrial revolution, and I do believe India must play a lead role, and I think this institution has to play an important role in that direction. If you could see that, let me go back to the whole thing. As I mentioned to you, the improved communication by railways, steamship, telegraph product to industrial use, the future of the armed forces was increasingly linked to modern technology and mass production. It's very important, mass production is there. Today, even today, 15% of its GDP US spends, India is spending about 6%. I do believe we need to increase it to a significant extent. But just you can't increase spending unless you have people who can do more research work, more technology work. And that is where the institute like here must play a role. You should be helping with research and developmental activities. That is the kind of thing what we need to do. Now we all know technology is the strength and creator of wealth. But the question to be answered is, how do we achieve technological strength and what is the fastest way to reach our goal? We all agree, I think housewives onwards everybody agree, but how do you jump the whole thing and come up? So if you look at the survey of the whole thing, you see aviation has been one of the most significant technological interests of our time. World over, aviation has been the prime engine. It provides the military might, ensuring not only national security, but a dominant voice in the international relations. Governments are the major powers promote and protect the aviation industry for national security, as well as for its technological underpinnings. Aware of the strategic, economic and technological importance, policymakers have placed highest priority in aircraft industry. In fact, countries like USA and Europe, government and industry cooperate to produce high-tech industry because they consider technological superiority to be important for military security and also for economics. These are the technologies which give you both. It's a double. It gives you what you call strength, military strength and economic strength, and that is where it becomes important. Now, what is this aviation? It's not a unique science or technology. It is a multi and interdisciplinary activity. It involves mechanical engineering, structural engineering, aerodynamics, electronics, materials, chemical, thermal. In fact, about 40 to 45 different disciplines. But important point is, each has to perform its role optimally while keeping the constraints and needs of other technologies. This is important. All these disciplined people must work together. While one is doing, he must know the limitations and constraints from the other. So it is a kind of work where you have to meet conflicting requirements, making the different people work together, different technologies work together. In other words, it is a team efficiency. 45 disciplined people have to work together and make it happen. If I make it too heavy, the aircraft won't take off. If the reliability is low, well, aircraft will take off, but it won't land. Okay, you are all traveling by air. Imagine your aircraft. If there is a car, if there is a problem, okay, you can take the car outside, you can repair and all. Imagine from Varanasi you are going to Delhi, and suddenly the aircraft started giving trouble. What will happen? Can you stop somewhere at Allahabad and repair it? You can't. That means the reliability levels required is extraordinarily high. The safety levels required is extraordinarily high. Normally for a civil transport aircraft, we say something like 1:2 in 10 million operations, one failure is accepted. 10 million operations. Okay? Okay, but that is the what you call airworthiness requirement. In actual practice, it's 100 million operations, one failure is actually done. So see the kind of what you call reliability and also the kind of strength and stiffness we have to do. This is the reason why largest investments are made in military aircraft.
Most demanding and most diverse performance. The best technologies and often the best science analysis in the development of military aircraft, most especially in London. Are you able to hear? Yes. USA, they want to be leaders in technology. They say they should be at least 5 years ahead of Europe and Japan in technology, and 10 years ahead of the rest of the world. So that means what they have developed, they don't want you to develop in next 10 years, because then they will lose their leadership. Okay? So they will do everything. They want to be ahead. That's how they invest a lot of money in doing that. So we once did a comparison. So they consider as defense critical technology. Okay? And also they want their commerce, their commercial interest to be at a higher level. So we said, let's compare what they call as commercially important technologies, defense important technologies. I mentioned to you, a country like USA today still has the leadership technology. They want to be 5 years ahead of Europe and Japan. Want to be 10 years ahead of that. And we were trying to compare. See, US Ministry of Defense periodically publishes what are critical technologies. And US Department of Commerce, it also publishes what is important for USA to remain a wealthy country. Academically strong. Okay? They want to do that. So we compared the defense technologies, commerce technologies, and then we said, which out of these technologies are aeronautical technology, aviation technology? I will read off because you can't see that. They were looking at digital imaging technology, which is still very important. The commercial people say digital imaging technology is very important. Optoelectronics is important. Sensors are important. Supercomputing, superconductors are important. That is what you call the commercial people were talking. Then they said advanced materials are important. Artificial intelligence is important. then for integrated manufacturing and high density data storage. These are some of the things the commercial department said important. Then let us see what the Minister of Defense will talk. They talk of sensitive radar, automatic target recognition, integrated optics, fiber optics, passive sensors, machine intelligence and robotics, superconductivity, phased array, signature control, air breathing propulsion, high power microwaves, pulsed power, hyper velocity projectiles, high temperature, high strength, lightweight materials and composites, machine intelligence and robotics, sensitive radars, automatic target recognition, data fusion, and software producibility, parallel computing, simulation and modeling, data fusion, computational fluid. If you look at these, you compare them, actually 98% is common between commercially important and defense important. That means, and both are, except one area, biotechnology, all other areas are aviation technology. Without all this technology, what I have now read to you, you can't make an aircraft. Okay? You need radars, you need advanced materials, you need machine intelligence, you need data fusion, you need all those kinds, computational fluid dynamics, all those things. Okay, what does it mean? That means, if I am a leader in aviation, I am a leader in defense technology, I am also a leader in commercial. That means, if you want to become fast, want fast grow, you become a leader in aviation. Okay? Automatically, you will become a defense technology guru. You will also have technology with which your industry can grow, you can generate value, you can generate the society, what you can have the benefit. So that is why you look at them. That is why when you look at today, those countries which are militarily strong, those countries which are militarily strong, like India, those countries which are militarily strong are also economically strong. They are economic strength, military, and they are also aviation leaders. You look at USA. We will export in basmati rice, textile, whole year. And that fellow, he will export one Boeing 787. पूरा साल तक हम बेच रहे हैं, वो एक भेज देगा. Okay, so what it means? I think India there should be a reverse role where we will export aircraft and we don't mind buying textiles. What I am telling is, aviation, once you get the leadership, you become master of technologies. And once you are technologies, you are militarily strong, you are economically also strong. So that is the reason why India was thinking, the previous government, present government was thinking that we must now develop our own aircraft, and that to fighter aircraft. Then we should follow it with a civil transport aircraft and all that one. So that's how long back, more than 2.5 decades back, a decision was taken that we must design and develop our own fighter aircrafts. Okay? And ये काम नहीं कर रहा? ये लेटी आएगा, ये नहीं आएगा. Mechanical engineers can't make everything work simultaneously. No. So I think you have a nice classroom, but we must have a backup one. Okay? Hardly class. So we must do that. These are all small things, but the back of a lot. Okay? No, I want you also talk to you on another important. If you see the war today, gone are the days where some thousands of soldiers are going to fighting with each other. You see, long back, Iraq war was there. Iraq war, USA used its fighters. They won over Iraq. They lost only 4 cities. After they entered inside Iraq, they lost all the fellows. But to win the war, they lost all both. Subsequently, you see the Libyan war, the Kosovo war, any of these wars, it is only the air power which is making them. Look at India. There was some time like recently there was a Kargil war, there was a news item and all. The adversary was at the top of the hill, and our fellows were trying to climb up. He had a gun. When the fellow comes, he was shooting him down. So it was going on for a long time. And India, the government took a decision, we have to use air power. So they used a Iraq 2000. This decision, it's called a laser guided. That fellow went dropped with an accuracy of 100 centimeters. 3 minutes के बाद the whole thing was reversed. Because both fellows were sitting on the top. They are no more there to sit. तो सब ऊपर चले गए. Now he was there. So air power, air superiority. In fact, that cover is there. The army can enter and fight. That is what.
So that is the reason why there. Then let's see what is it, why it is so important. What are the key elements of this aviation? It is lightweight. It should be the lightest possible. We go on researching materials. From steels we came to aluminum. For aluminum we have come to carbon fiber, advanced in carbon composition, all those kind of things. Idea is to go on reducing them. Because the weight is less, you are able to take lift can be high. Then also it needs maximum strength and thickness. Okay? And it also needs very low power consumption.
Lot of these advanced electrical electronic things came in aviation because this power consumption has to be low. And the reliability level, I already mentioned to you, was extraordinary, has to be high.
Okay? And safety has to be very high. So the point is, these requirements demand best of technologies. So any aviation enables technology push with tremendous spin-offs integrating, invigorating large areas of economy. What is aviation economy? What is technology? Today after 10 years, it went into health, it entered into automobiles, it entered into everywhere. So that leadership is very, very important. So what happens? Because the aviation continuously demanding better, so you have to go on improving. So today we are already worried that the light combat aircraft, we need to have a successor to that, because otherwise we will be behind in technology. So that is what we need to do. It is defense strength and its leadership in aerospace technologies. So today, USA imports everything, but it exports aerospace. 80% of its exports are only aerospace. And 70% of the passenger aircraft in the whole world are US. So as long as they have the leadership in aerospace, so you need to enter in, you have to take a leadership. Because the market is shifting now. Earlier, North America, Europe were the market. But today, market is shifting to Asia, and Asia includes major players here in India and China. If we are the market and we have the technology, we are the leader. So that is what is important for us. So in India, all these years we were only importing. Okay. My wife has heard this joke a number of times. I used to say, Indians want to import everything. Maybe सब कुछ import कर रहे हैं, लेकिन एक चीज नहीं कर रहे. All Indian made. That is wife. Wife has to be Indian. We want to import
take risk. When you never take risk, never gain anything. Isn't that? You tell me. If you don't take risk, don't do anything, how can you gain anything? Will you? How to be prepared for failure? But every failure, you must learn the lessons. And that will lead to a failure. So after failure, you will have confidence. When you overcome that failure, you will be able to do the challenge. You thought you could do, but today you are not. So risk taking, accepting failures is an integral part of our training. Problems are that once you fail, you will also find what are the problems. And then you try to find how to solve them. So these are the key elements. And only when you take risk, only when you start accepting failure, you will innovate. Innovation is not possible with zero risk. I thought it's very, very important. That any big technology, any big thing you want to do, please remember you have to take risk. You have to accept failure. But my boss used to tell me, failure fast. ताकि वो enough time to succeed. अब पूरा जिंदगी failure में चला गया तो success के लिए time कहाँ है? So we must fast quickly experiment, quickly see what are the problem, and quickly get out of the problem and come to the solution. Okay? That is what is important to boss. And what I want to mention to you, because we never wanted to, we were not taking the risk. We are not making any aircraft in India. We are happily importing. Maximum we will do it, we will make it under license. A license, no, those days we used to hear a word called license permit grant. Permit अब कम हो गया, लेकिन license अब भी चल रहा है. So we have to know about that. So how that is how to do it like and they thought the teaching institutions, they are good, but they have lost their ability to innovate and their ability to take this. So they created a new institution and like Bangalore or Ernakulam. And they said this institution is now given the responsibility to take it. And let them do, let them integrate people, do what they want, but they must have. So I say, sometimes you know, you use the word मुर्गा, एक मुर्गे के लिए ढूंढ रहे हैं, अब वही मुर्गा. I was there because they wanted somebody who is not going to retire in next 5 years or 10 years. They wanted a young fellow. So I took over as the program director and then the chief designer. It was a interesting job, tough job. But what happened was, what I figured, the general feeling is Indians cannot work alone. It's a general feeling. We can't form team, but let me tell you my experience. We worked with 300 industries, about 40 R&D laboratories, Durgapur, but there are a lot of institutions, about 25 academic institutions. In fact, the metallurgy department in India also did a lot of work for our project. What I'm saying is, these people worked not for 1 or 2 years, they worked for 15 years. Thousands of engineers, scientists, technicians, they worked for it. In 1998, we thought within a year we are ready to fly. Then what happened? India had exploded a bomb. Atom bomb. I don't know whether India has what happened? They listened to the bomb and exploded a bomb. Then what happened? USA, every put a ban on us. No technology can do it. Some work we were doing on TV control. They sent us away. And they did the house. Yes, come now. I can now quickly go through. I think the power has come. Are you able to see anything?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm just showing the aircraft, and I am showing all the aircraft, all are imported. Now, we are now replacing these things. We want to replace, you all have to replace with indigenous things, okay? So this is how this aircraft was born. We want to replace all mixed series of aircraft with the light combat aircraft, okay? And it is the smallest lightweight fighter in the world. There is nothing smaller than this in the whole world today. Okay, to make small is not easy. This is the toughest job. Okay, so it is for some 3 roles, not for deep penetration, not going deeper, but support the army, air defense, air superiority, and what we call as an interdiction. Something like about 250 to 300 kilometers of range it will have, but very good combat capability. These are the roles I am talking. These are the weapons it is supposed to carry, and these are the kind of technologies it should have. Some of these technologies are just top end of the technologies, and we didn't have any of these technologies. That was the challenge. I want to show after Second World War, there were generations of what you call fighters that came. What you call generation 1 is a subsonic, below the speed of sound. Generation 2 is transonic. Generation 3 is supersonic. You will see in generation 1, you see number of aircraft, the USA, in those days USSR, now Russia, UK, all of them are developing many things. Second generation, you will see many things are done. And third generation, India developed one aircraft called HF-24 Marut, but it was headed by a German design team. It's not an Indian team, but that was done in India. After that, we had what you call bisonic, then multi-role aircraft, then what you call next generation fighters, that is what we required. We didn't have any program in the 4th and 5th generation. Then it came to 6th. Then the LCA came. So in technology business, I want to mention to you, if you have some strength, you have to continue to do research development to keep that leadership position. If you don't do that, you will slip. And you have to run to stay where you are. Okay? You have to run to stay where you are. And if you are not even running, if you are not even walking, you imagine what will happen. If that was to happen to India, we are not even walking, we are crawling, not even crawling. So we went back from that kind of thing. So the requirement was no fighter program, non-existent computer facilities, and no significant technology development, and shrinking research and developmental activities. So the challenge was to develop innovation. I want to talk to you because today you were talking about a lecture in innovation and all. Okay, this is the point. I think this aircraft is an example of innovation, and that innovation, see, there are 2 types of innovation I want to do. One is called core technologies. I have given a list of technologies. Second is called enabling technology. Computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing, computer-aided process planning, computational fluid dynamics, computational electromagnetics, system safety, integration, modeling, simulation. These are all enabling technologies. They will enable you to do a better product. If I have a computer-aided design capability, I can do a better product. If I have a computer manufacturing, I can manufacture in a better way. Okay? If I have a computational electromagnetics, I will see there is no EMI-EMC problem at all. Okay? That is because I can predict and design in such a way there will be no issue. But second, very important thing is, you need an organizational innovation. You need a flexible management structure, a virtual concept of what you call corporation, where you network all the working centers, network the industry, laboratory and academia, and in some areas where we found no 1 or 2 or 3 institutions could work, we formed national teams. People from all over the country, they came together and they worked. And then we established what you call a strong quality system. See, Jugaad will work for some time, but lifelong Jugaad will not work. Okay? We have to go from Jugaad to a systems approach. Okay? That's what we have learned. So our aim was to develop an aircraft of world class. These are the kind of we have developed an aircraft called the tailless delta compound with compound sweep. The only aircraft in the world to have this kind of, there is nothing else of that side. very high. It's an unstable aircraft. See, a fighter has to be agile. For it to be agile, it should be unstable. But designing such an aircraft is tougher. We have 4 computers in the aircraft. If one fails, other 3 can take off. 2 fail, 2. 3 fails, still 1 will be there. This is called a quadruplex digital system. We have an all-composite airframe, very light airframe. In fact, 90% of this aircraft surface is composites. It is a glass cockpit, all avionics, micropress-based utility system. There is a health monitoring in this one, a fixed intakes, and very low wing loading, and a single F2. We still have an American engine. I hope someday we will replace it with indigenous. All these technologies I have written here have been developed in the country. I am showing this one here. You will see the gray. All that is made of advanced composites, and 90% by surface area and 45% by weight is composite material. When we started the project, we were having 0, but when we entered the project, this aircraft had the highest percentage of composites anywhere in the world, and that is what could be achieved. Just giving you an idea, earlier aircraft had 32,000 parts. The LCA has 7,000 parts. You will all agree with me as a good engineers, if parts are less failures will occur. If you have more people, more problems. If you have less people, less problems. So there are less people here, less than 25%. We had a very high, what you call fly-by-wire system. When you go to website, you can see that, and a glass cockpit. We have an onboard computer which can be, see, the electronics are changing so fast. Your architecture should be such that you can change them without changing the architecture, other systems, and that's what we have achieved. And these are the avionics and weapon systems. I want to tell you, today, except 2 items, all others are made indigenously in the country. The other 2 also, maybe in the next couple of years, they will be ready. This is the glass cockpit. There are no dial instruments, nothing of that. Everything is programmable, and that is what gives the flexibility to the pilot. This is the other aircraft. This is what you call a helmet-mounted display. The pilot need not have to see outside. He has the displays right and projecting to his eyes. Through that, he can see what is happening. He can see ahead of him, and he can also see his own weapons when he has to fire. This is called the helmet-mounted display. These are the kind of weapons, okay, that are being used on this aircraft. This is the multimode radar which we are using, which is the important element. These are the kind of weapon systems we are working. It has many weapons. I'll show you a video. But one of the key elements here is, in addition to the hardware I talked about, you need an extremely safety critical software. This aircraft, if it goes out of control more than 200 milliseconds, if the computers don't, software fails for more than 200 milliseconds, aircraft will go out of control. So just maximum you have 200 milliseconds. Okay, within that you have to make all changes. The software just cannot do it. And I thought one of the great things we have learned is how to develop safety critical and mission critical software. Okay, we have built in tremendous amount of reliability. Last 15 years, thousands of hours of flight, never seen a single plane. It shows it is possible to design a highly reliable aircraft. Now, question you will ask is how indigenous is that? Say, some खरीद के ले आया और कुछ काम भी किया. This is the integrated flight control system. Today, all these systems except the Aerodata Pro, which is just getting ready, all indigenous. Today we have them indigenous. I am showing the yellow. All those which are yellow, they are all indigenous. You can see there is tremendous amount of indigenous content here. This is the environment control system, your air conditioning system, what you call. All the critical elements here have been done indigenously. All the heat exchangers, the what you call primary, secondary, cold air unit, pumps, valves, all of them have been done within the country. They have been done by the research labs, R&D institutions, the academic like IIT Kharagpur, our friends from one very unknown place called BHPB in Visakhapatnam. They manufacture all these heat exchangers and they develop it. And they work very closely with the academic institutions and a lab called DMR. These are the hydraulic systems. You will see some of the most critical things have been developed in the country. This is the secondary power system. All are done within the country. And this is what you call a brake management system. You will see here, all of them have been done. For example, you use carbon brakes. The carbon technology, what we are using here, the origin is the carbon technology they have developed for the Agni missile. Okay, they have a, what do you call it, a cover which withstands temperatures of more than 2000 degrees centigrade. When you apply brakes, the temperature will go that high. So that is the thing which developed this way. See, when they developed the technology, they never thought of aircraft. They were only talking about a missile. But you see, that has helped to develop. So once you develop, that helps you in other things. That is what happens. Okay? We have to do an enormous amount of test facilities. There is a electromagnetic interference facilities, ground checkout system. Let me see if I can show some of them. This is the lightning test facility. What happens? Metals are very good conductors. So because they are very good conductors, it conducts any lightning comes, it will dissipate it. But composites are not good conductors. So you have to design such that when there is a lightning, it will pass through without damaging the equipment inside. So that is an important technology. Not only you have to do that, but you have to test and prove that it actually works. So there is one professor, Professor Nagabhushan from Indian Institute of Science. He built the whole facility. He created the whole thing, high voltage, high current, whereby he simulates actual, what you call, lightning, and we put the whole aircraft there and make the aircraft operate in the presence of lightning and check and see that it works. So that is what it done. And this facility, when it got ready and started using, became the best facility in the whole world. So you could see that in a place like India, you could do something which is the best in the world. The second very important thing for all of you, because I hope enough importance is being given, modeling and simulation. Because when this aircraft was getting ready, the people who are designed are new, people who are inspected are new, people who are certified are new, and the pilot who is going to fly also is new. Nobody has ever got any experience. How do you prove that the aircraft is safe to fly without flying? That is where modeling and simulation. You model them very accurately, simulate whole aircraft flying. In fact, the pilot has flown something like 3,000 hours on a simulator before he went there. And when he went and came back, the question asked to him was, how did you feel? He says, I felt as if I am flying in the simulator. That means the simulation was so accurately done, he didn't feel anything. So modeling and simulation, and the new generation, what is happening today, this is a key technology. So I hope you will all learn by that, whether it's a hydraulics, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, any engineering, modeling and simulation is the backbone. If I'm developing a pump, first thing I do is develop a model for the pump. If I'm developing a valve, I must know how the valve is functioning in the computer. I will model it, I'll check it. I will introduce failures and check it. I think that is what we have to do. Okay? It's very, very important we do that. So we did enormous amount of modeling and simulation, and thanks to that, we could do something good. We used all tools to do this one. Time is going up. We use a facility called Iron Bar. The whole aircraft is as if anchored to the ground, and we fly the whole aircraft on the ground and see whether it will. And we introduce faults and check whether, in spite of the fault, whether the aircraft is safe to fly or not. So that is what we call as Iron Bar. And we do a structural coupling test. We test it like that, hanging. Okay, that's what we do. And we do have a dynamic avionics weaponry where we simulate weapons and fly the aircraft with weapons and see whether it is working or not. We do what you call integration and testing facilities. One of the most difficult things is when you flight test it, you are going to unknown regions, and how do you ensure that system works well? So to all that, we also need a lot of enabling technologies, right from CAD/CAM and other things. Computation fluid dynamics is an extremely important technology. I'm sure it is in mechanical, aeronautics, everywhere. So this is what we developed. When we started, we had only drawing boards. Today we have what you call a digital system, total. No, even drawing board is not even known to present engineers. So you can see that. We developed also a software called automatic layout system. This is the software from conceptual design to quality control, manufacturing, design, everything is done. It's an interesting story because we developed this whole software for develop the wings of LCA, light combat aircraft. But when we doing that, one professor from University of Warwick came and he had a look at it. He says, it's a extraordinarily good software, and why don't you sell? I said, we will be happy to sell, but we don't know whom to sell. We don't know whom to sell. He said, no. The people who really want this kind of software are the industries in Europe, Airbus, all those people, Boeing and all. I said, let us see how we can do. Then, what I want to tell you is, they did a benchmarking of the software, composite software, the whole world, and they found our software is the best in the world. And they bought from us. Around that time, there is a business week of New York. You have a business week here also. They were looking at which are the innovation centers of the whole world. So they identified 5 such centers of the whole world. I'm happy to tell you, one of the 5 centers is this team in India. And they are putting at the top of their front page. They said real innovation is occurring here. Okay? From zero. I think that's what happened. And today, if you have a chance to go in an A380, 800-seater passenger aircraft, or A350, you will be traveling an aircraft whose composite parts have been designed using our software. So be happy, don't worry. That's what happens. And as I said, simulation is a very, very critical activity. We spent a lot of effort in that. What I mentioned to you in the beginning, we had the tremendous, what you call, participation of industries, R&D labs, academia, and I tell you, this is what helped to innovate. See, I want to give one thing. See, industry fellows will think in one particular way. R&D fellows will think in a different way. Academic fellows think totally different way. So, but you know, when you want to innovate, you do not want everybody to think in the same way. You want people who think differently. If everybody thinking in the same way, how will the change will occur? So sometimes good to have people who think differently. Suppose you don't have people who are thinking differently, you bring a fellow who thinks differently. And we will question you, then things will happen. And that is exactly what happened to us. It's a very open, we had people of different background, different thinking and all, but one single common goal. We will make this aircraft in India. That is the company. The goal should be common. Okay, if goals are also different, then we garbad ho jayega. But if the common goal is there, different thinking should be welcome. In fact, my boss, that Kalam used to, whenever there used to be a review, if everybody is agreeing, he will get worried. इसका मतलब दो चीज़ है. One is boss said so we agree. Second thing, nobody read anything. So how can they disagree? So what he will do, he will look around. One young just joined engineering, there is sitting in one corner. He will look at his face and he found this fellow, his face we know he is not agreeing. But he didn't have the courage to say, I am not agreeing. But he will catch that fellow. After 2-3 minutes of telling no sir, he will come up. And he will make a statement. That statement will change everything. All these fellows who are agreeing, now they have to go back, work, and more often than not, what that fellow said is the correct. And they will come. So disagreement constructively is an important element of innovation. And I'm happy to tell you that's what we had. It's very important. And I want to show this map because you will see the whole country was involved in this project. You will see BHU also. BHU also is here. Okay. Except one state, Jammu and Kashmir. Everybody else is involved, and that's how we could network the whole country to do this. What happened? There are 4 elements I thought is important for this community to know. There are people, the designers, the R&D people, the academia and industry, they generate knowledge. Then there is another group which do what you call knowledge intensification. There's the third group called knowledge validation. The fourth group, after you do knowledge transfer. So you create knowledge, you intensify the knowledge because 10 technologies are there, you have to put them all together, then only it will become a system. Then you have to test and validate that what you have done is right. Okay, having tested, validated, now you transfer product. So you can't say one is more important or less important. There are 4 parts of that chair. If one leg is weak, then you know what happens. So you need to, in any ecosystem what we are talking, you need all the 4. And only when all the 4 are there, then economy comes up. Okay, that's what. So what it means is suppose, because today you are talking of innovation, you have a great mission, here in this case like combat aircraft, then your ideas are generated all over, then you develop skills and facilities, you develop technologies, you develop systems. Above all, you develop a culture, the culture where you believe in yourself, you think you can do, and you do, and you reinforce that, whereby you are able to come to a great level. I think that is what happens. I want to spend 2 more things. Lot of new developments are occurring in aviation. I don't want to take too much time, but lot of these things, there are new unmanned. I was telling you there is a manned fighter which is going to be replaced with an unmanned fighter. This is thing, and stealth fighters. There are a lot of new technologies are coming. I am just rushing through, but so that you get an idea. The new transport aircraft is coming, and new helicopters are coming, a new unmanned, what you call, unmanned reconnaissance and surveillance aircraft are coming, and this aircraft can fly for 36 hours. Okay, but you are also doing some micro air vehicles and all that. Lot of new things are happening. You will see 2 kilogram class. New air-to-air missiles are being developed in the country. Okay, and what you call new hypersonic vehicles are under development in the country. This is a hypersonic test vehicle, and all these things are now working what you call a net-centric system. Net-centric system. So this net-centric system means all have to be in sync with each other. Gone are the days where one can work independent of other. This is what has to be done. This is what is happening. And also now we are working on a new generation regional transport aircraft. This is where I am spending my time now. This is a transport aircraft that needs a lot of new technologies. We have 450 airfields in India. We are operating only 86. We want to make this 450 operational so that the whole country can be networked. So you don't have to travel more than 70-80 kilometers from your hometown to go to an airport. That is our mission. Okay? So then you need a new kind of aircraft, and that is what we are doing. And what it means is, today, thanks to LCA project, we develop a lot of new technologies, and now today there is a lot of confidence, new fighters, new unmanned vehicles, new transport aircraft, new helicopters are coming. As a result, the Indian aviation is coming to a great level, and a lot of new jobs, and I hope with new jobs, new technologies, greater wealth will come. And what I talked happened, okay, Europe became a wealthy country, USA became country. I think 4th industrial revolution, I hope India will become the country which can rule the world. And that's what I'm thinking we should do. I just want to show a 5-minute video. Can we just this one? Just I want to show a video. One. This is the aircraft I have been talking to you. This aircraft, you see 2 of them are flying, 3 of them are now flying. We have once in 2 years air show in Bangalore, but this time these aircraft is now participating in Bahrain in an international air show. You could see 5 of them are flying. You will see this aircraft doing various maneuvers, firing a close combat missile. It's flying in Leh. It is the highest airport in the world. This aircraft also can take off and land from a carrier. So we are testing that. There is a parachute. I think you had a talk, I think, by Sati. One of the talk where Sati was talking. It is his lab who developed all these parachutes. This is how a pilot will look at from his depth. This is a missile being fired with a helmet mounted display. That's what I mentioned. Is there sound in there? You can see the
mounted display system worn by the pilot. The missile then goes on to laser guided bomb release. The bomb drops from the aircraft from an altitude of 5 kilometers and scores a direct hit. Live 1,000-pound bomb drop. The bomb, released from an altitude of 1.6 kilometers in a shallow dive, hits the target and explodes. The aircraft crosswind operation trials at Jamnagar. Here, the aircraft comes in for a landing with crosswinds from the right. The aircraft follows a crab technique with nose offset into the wind. As the aircraft is about to touch down, the pilot straightens out the aircraft and touches down neatly. Radar lock-on depicted on the head-up display. A lock-on is obtained on another LCA, the target designated the square box. Simultaneous tracking of 2 targets by the radar. Here, the radar tracks 2 targets moving away from each other in azimuth. At first, the radar obtains a lock-on of the target on the right, followed a little later by the pilot switching to the target on the left. The light combat aircraft participated creditably in IAF exercise Iron Fist, demonstrating swing roll capability. Swing roll involves firing a laser-guided bomb on a ground target, followed immediately by firing the R-73 air-to-air missile on an airborne target. The main and the standby aircraft line up and take off on time. The takeoff as observed from an onboard camera. Over range, the main aircraft fires the laser-guided bomb first, achieving correct time over target. Demonstrating swing roll, the aircraft then fires the air-to-air missile. The missile firing as observed from the cockpit and the small circle depicting the hit of the target. The aircraft releases flares successfully as it exits the range. Mission accomplished, the 2 aircraft rejoin. Here, the standby aircraft, as seen from the lead, a successful emergency jettison of stores comprising drop tanks and 1,000-pound bombs was completed at Jamnagar. The aircraft here flies at 2 kilometers at a speed of 0.7 Mach. The drop tanks fall first, dropping clean off the aircraft, followed by the bombs, achieving a safe separation. Jettison of stores as observed from an onboard camera.
This is how a pilot sees from his cockpit. He is seeing the external world. You can see, he can see exactly how is when he drops a bomb, how it functions. You can see that it hits the target. Accurately you can see. Thank you.
is good to imagine. Unless you aspire. Talking a little bit Hyderabad. The way the technology is going, I think possible to do lots of things what we thought was not possible. More like imagination. Questions when we don't have good answers. But I'm saying, see, in India, aviation defense, too long a time, was a government act. Not that there is anything wrong with that, but we also didn't allow private sector to participate in it. The disadvantage of not allowing one, there is no competition. And if there is no competition, there is no challenge. Nobody reads one challenge. But now, in the last 10 years, there has been a push to bring private sector in a bigger way. And now we see the Tatas have been manufacturing good aircraft, but a big part of the aircraft, what are the Reliance also is manufacturing big industries have come up. Mahindra Aerospace make all my appreciation is the present government is pushing hard that they want things to be done in India. Is see, people used to popularly call India as Haridana Republic. Haridana Republic you have to make banana republic, not banana. They have to make it India. I feel there is another 5 years you will see a transformation. And you will find most of these industries, not the Indian industries, outside and outside. Interestingly, in aviation, every aviation company in the world, they have an R&D center in India. But Indian private sector has come up in a big way. But I find the new government, they are pushing. And they are pushing people to see that incentives are given so that so a lot of change will happen, not more than 30%. Major technologies, three major technologies we are looking at. Stealth technology. Second is what you call autonomous flight. You don't have a pilot inside. The aircraft can fly by itself, take off, land, navigate. If there is a threat, it can detect a threat and it can change its direction, it can attack. Okay, that's what I call. I didn't show too much in detail for ourselves reasons, but it's called a combative, unmanned combat. A lot of work is going on the world over. They are also doing that work, and that will be the next thing. Third thing that is going to happen is the way the flying is going to take place, not only for the fighters, but actually more and more can be a technology. But okay, we have automated getting vehicles own system. But on that part also, like someone, suppose we have a war aircraft that is going on a base. There could be someone who can actually connect the aircraft, like they are the frequency can connect them. So in that way, they can actually adapt ourselves. That's why there is a technology called cyber security. Okay? The cyber security is a very, very important technology, whereby your onboard systems must be able to discriminate a threat from a advance, a signal from an advance zone to a friendly zone. This is not the technology. Otherwise, flying autonomously, people have been doing for a long time. But now you have to fly it under these adverse conditions. So we can't expect the adversity to keep going.
Friends, I'm sure you must have felt a wonderful experience listening to Dr. Kota Harinarayana. All those who missed this particular lecture, I'm sure they have missed a lot of excitement and also 50 years of experience of Dr. Harinarayana, whom it is a wonderful journey that he has undertaken. And I'm part of on the faculty, so I feel really surprised and dismayed that we never had a chance to invite him anytime in the last 50 years to Institute of Technology. I'm sure we have missed quite a lot, sir, but it is very nice that you have taken this opportunity and visited. And all the young minds here, mechanical engineers, are really thrilled by your lecture and they are greatly benefited. More than the benefit, I'm sure you have enthused them to stay in India. That is very important, and contribute to the technology and development of our country in the next coming years. Please give him a big hand. So, it's a great pleasure, and then as Professor Sharma said, we had many illustrious speakers, and you have crowned all of them, if I may say, by your lecture, today's lecture. Thank you so much.